He made her kneel to keep her job. What happened next will surprise you. Subscribe for true stories that move. The office tower was nearly empty by the time Amara pushed her mop down the long marble corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting cold reflections on the floor. It was almost 10 p.m., and the building had slipped into its after-hours silence, a time when people like her came in to clean the mess left behind by people like them. Amara was 25. Young, strong, fast with her hands. She learned to smile at the front desk, to keep her head down, to clean efficiently and not ask questions. She wore cheap gloves and carried a spray bottle hooked to her hip. She never thought she'd be working here this long, cleaning offices full of people who wouldn't even look at her. But rent didn't care about dreams. Neither did childcare or student loans. And her son, Malik, needed food. Needed her. So she worked. 6 nights a week. No insurance. No benefits. No backup. That night, she was scrubbing a conference table on the 21st floor when she heard the laughter. It was late, way too late for Suits to still be around. But she heard it again, deep male voices, laughing hard, and one of them trying to tell a joke he could barely finish. She didn't want to eavesdrop. She only wanted to finish and go. But then, through the glass doors of the executive lounge, she heard her name. Well, she's got that attitude. You know how they are. Always gotta act like they're too good to scrub floors. More laughter. I mean, come on. Maybe if she spent less time rolling her eyes and more time doing her damn job. Amara froze. They were talking about her. A flush of heat rushed up her neck. Her eyes burned. She knew the voice. Mr. Landenberg. Senior VP. White. Mid-40s. Navy blue suits. Expensive watch. The kind of man who nodded politely in elevators but never really saw her. She tried to walk away. She really did. But as she turned, the door opened and Burke stepped out tall, confident, holding a glass of something brown. "Oh, speak of the devil," he said. Amara met his eyes. "You were talking about me?" His smirk didn't waver. "It was a joke. Don't take it so seriously." Sounded pretty serious to me. His brow lifted, like she'd surprised him. And then, in that polished lobby, under those bright lights, Amara added, maybe too sharply, "Next time, tell it to someone who thinks you're funny." There was silence. His smile dropped, just a flicker, and he turned back inside. She should have walked away then. But something about the way he looked at her, like she wasn't even a person, made her chest tighten with rage. The next night, she got the call from her supervisor. "Mr. Burke filed a complaint," they said. "He claims you were disrespectful and aggressive." Amara's jaw dropped. "He insulted me. Were there witnesses?" She knew what that meant. "Come in tomorrow," they said. The company wanted to discuss her attitude. The next day, Amara stood outside a glass-walled office on the 24th floor, a floor she'd never had reason to visit before. Her work badge felt heavy on her chest. The building looked different in daylight. Brighter, shinier, and even less welcoming. She dressed as neatly as she could, dark jeans, a clean blouse, hair pulled back tightly. But she still felt out of place, like a trespasser. Like they were watching her the moment she stepped off the elevator. The receptionist, a young white woman with pastel pink nails, barely looked up as she said, "You can go in now." Inside, the room was sleek and cold. Mr. Burke stood by the window, his back turned, staring out at the skyline. He didn't turn when she entered. "Sit." Amara didn't. She stood silently by the chair, heart pounding, every muscle tight. He finally turned, a folder in one hand, thin, probably empty, just a prop. "I'll get to the point," he said, setting the folder down. "You made a scene last night. You disrespected a senior executive in front of his colleagues. That's grounds for immediate termination." Her hands clenched at her sides. "With all due respect." "No," he cut in, raising a hand. "You had a moment to show you understand your place. And you didn't take it." Amara felt a sharp sting in her chest at the word place. "I do my job," she said, her voice steady. "And I've done it without complaint for 3 years. But you think you can snap at me in front of clients?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. He leaned forward on the desk, resting both hands. "I should fire you. But I'm offering you a way to keep your job." She stared. "What way?" Burke circled the desk slowly and came to stand in front of her, not too close, but close enough. "You embarrassed me. I want to know that you understand what you did, that you regret it. Public disrespect requires a public apology." "I didn't disrespect." "I said public," he repeated, cutting her off again. "There's no one else here now, but I want you to show me you're serious about keeping your job." Then, quietly, almost casually, Get on your knees. Ask for forgiveness. The words hit her like ice water. What? You heard me. One moment of humility, he said, like it was nothing. And this whole thing goes away. She felt her stomach twist. The room swayed slightly. But why? He looked down at her, voice flat. Do you want the job or not? The air went dead. Images flashed in her head, her son, the overdue rent, the debt collectors calling during her shifts. She felt sick. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Her knees touched the polished floor. He didn't gloat. Didn't laugh. He just watched her. Say it. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. She couldn't believe she was saying it. That she was here. Good, he said. Now get up. She stood slowly, rage and shame burning through her body like fire. He adjusted his cufflinks, then sat back down. That's all. You may go. She left the room without a word, eyes straight ahead. When the elevator doors closed, she finally exhaled, one long, shaking breath. She'd kept her job, but she'd left something else behind. And deep inside, she knew he would try again. Amara sat in the break room later that night, staring into her coffee like it might offer answers. The cleaning staff had just started their shift, a skeleton crew on Thursdays. No one spoke much. Just the hum of vending machines and the sound of wet shoes on tile. Her knees still ached. Every time she thought about what happened, the moment she lowered herself, the weight in her chest grew heavier. She hadn't told anyone. What could she say? That her boss made her kneel to keep her job? Would anyone believe her? Or worse, would they say it was her fault? Around midnight, she was alone on the 17th floor when her phone buzzed. Blocked number. She hesitated, then picked up. Miss Carter, came Burke's voice, casual and smooth. Just checking in. Her mouth went dry. What do you want? You handled yourself well today, he said. I expected attitude. You showed humility. That's rare. Silence. I'm working, she said coldly. Of course, he replied. Just a quick reminder, there's a luncheon this Saturday. Executive floors need deep cleaning by Friday night. I know the schedule. Good. And Amara. She hated how he said her name. There's always room for people who know how to follow direction. The line clicked off. She stared at her phone, fury rising. By Friday, she worked in near silence. She didn't talk to the other cleaners. Didn't smile at the guards. Just kept her head down, mopped, wiped, emptied bins, and tried to forget the voice in her ear. But forgetting was impossible. Every glance from an executive made her tense. Every memory of that office, of the polished floor under her knees, twisted her gut. That night, as she was finishing up the executive break room, she heard a door open behind her. Her heart jumped. She turned. It was Burke. Alone again. He walked in like he owned the air. I have another favor to ask, he said, tone light, like he was ordering coffee. Amara stood still. No, she said. He blinked. Excuse me. No more favors. He stepped closer. I think you misunderstood. I was offering you a chance to prove your... I said no. He looked at her, measuring. And then, slowly, he smiled. We'll see how far that no gets you on Monday. She stood there, fist clenched, as he walked away. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She finished the floor, locked up the cart, and left the building with her head high. But deep inside, something had cracked. Something dangerous. She was starting to feel that burn, that line between fear and fury, and the line was getting thinner by the hour. The weekend passed like a fog. Amara barely slept. She spent most of Saturday with Malik, taking him to the park, watching him chase pigeons with his tiny steps. She tried to laugh, to feel normal. But every time her phone buzzed, her stomach clenched. Burke didn't call, didn't text. But his silence wasn't comforting, it was a threat wrapped in stillness. She kept thinking about what he said. We'll see how far that no gets you on Monday. On Monday morning, she walked into the staff locker room earlier than usual. The air smelled like bleach and old coffee. Patrice, one of the older cleaning ladies, gave her a tired nod. Girl, they moving people around today, she said. Reassignments. You hear anything? Amara shook her head. No. Why? Patrice shrugged. New manager upstairs. Big shuffle. But Amara already knew what it meant. She checked the printed schedule on the wall. Her name, Amara Carter, had been moved to the sub-basement maintenance zone. No sunlight. No ventilation. No tips. Mostly bathrooms and service tunnels. A demotion without a word. A punishment. She stared at the list until the letters blurred. She worked the basement shift in silence. Her gloves stuck to her skin. The smell of mildew was everywhere. She mopped floors so old they buckled. A rat skittered past her boot in the corridor. She wanted to scream. At lunch, she sat on a supply crate and picked at a granola bar. Her phone buzzed. Burke. I hope you're settling into your new space. Next time, think before you bite the hand that feeds you. Her hands shook. She typed and erased 3 different replies. Then she turned off the screen. That evening, while walking home in the rain, Amara stopped by a small grocery store. Her card declined twice at checkout. She had to put back milk and laundry detergent to afford the diapers. She cried in the stairwell of her apartment building, just for a minute, before wiping her face and opening the door to Malik's laughter. He ran into her arms like she hadn't just been humiliated, punished, and broken down. And that's when it hit her. This couldn't go on. That night, she pulled out her old laptop, the one with a cracked corner and missing keys. She started Googling workplace harassment, retaliation demotion, how to report racial discrimination anonymously. She found a few forums, a few legal aid groups, a nonprofit that supported women in low-wage jobs. And then she started typing her story. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. And she was done being silent. By Thursday, Amara had drafted her letter 5 different ways. She stayed up late every night after Malik fell asleep, writing, deleting, rewriting. Her words came out tangled with fear and fury. But the message was clear. She had been humiliated, retaliated against, discriminated. And she wasn't going to stay quiet. She sent the email to 3 different places. A local nonprofit that helped women of color in the workplace. A small investigative journalist she followed on Twitter. And the company's anonymous ethics hotline. It was done. Her hands trembled after she clicked send. She didn't expect anyone to answer. She didn't expect it to matter. But by Monday morning, things began to shift. First, a message in her inbox from the journalist. Can we talk? Your story matters. Then a call from the nonprofit. Come in. We've dealt with your employer before. Then whispers in the locker room. Someone else had heard about a story going around. Someone cleaning up on the top floor said there were nervous faces in management. By Wednesday, Burke hadn't shown up all week. And then she got a message from a number she didn't recognize. This is HR. We'd like to schedule a formal interview with you about a recent complaint. You will not be penalized for participating. Amara stared at the message. Her legs felt weak. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't filled with dread. She was filled with something sharper. Power. Later that evening, walking Malik home from daycare, she passed the marble entrance of the office tower, the same one she used to dread entering. She looked up at its windows, steel and glass and quiet. She whispered to herself, "You're not invisible." Amara sat in a beige conference room across from a woman in a navy pantsuit, the head of HR, introduced only as Ms. Dalton. A second woman sat in the corner with a laptop, typing every word. The walls were thin. Amara could hear the faint murmur of office chatter outside. But inside the room, it was quiet, too quiet. Ms. Dalton folded her hands. "We want to thank you for coming forward," she began. "Your complaint is being taken seriously." Amara nodded once. "We've also been informed that you've reached out to outside sources, including media." Amara's chest tightened. "Is that a problem?" Ms. Dalton gave a practiced smile. "Not at all. You have every right. We only ask for transparency." The irony nearly made Amara laugh. The questions began. Describe the first incident. Was anyone else present? Did Mr. Burke ever touch you or threaten you physically? Were there any witnesses when you were reassigned? It went on for nearly 2 hours. Amara told everything. The late-night office. The kneeling. The demotion. The message. The second attempt. His voice in her phone. She didn't embellish. She didn't flinch. By the end, Ms. Dalton's expression had hardened. "This is not acceptable," she said quietly. "There will be an internal review. In the meantime, you'll be temporarily reassigned." Amara's jaw tightened. "To where?" "Main lobby. Morning shift. We want you visible." Visible. She almost laughed again. For weeks they'd wanted her invisible. Now she was a symbol. The next morning, she stood behind the polished welcome desk, clipboard in hand. She wasn't in uniform anymore. They told her to wear business casual. Her name badge had been reprinted. Amara Carter, Facilities Coordinator. People noticed. A few nodded stiffly. A few whispered. One white woman from the executive team avoided her eyes entirely. And then, in the afternoon, a familiar voice. "Wow." She turned. Burke. He stood across the marble floor, freshly shaved, cufflinks shining, portfolio in hand. "You've been busy," he said, looking her up and down. She didn't answer. "Think you've won something?" Amara held his gaze. "I think I remembered who I am." He smiled, but this time it was tight. "Hollow. You should be careful. Power like this doesn't last." She stepped closer, quietly. "Neither does yours." He walked away. For the first time, she watched him retreat, and it felt like oxygen in her lungs. By the end of the week, Amara's inbox was full. Reporters, advocacy groups, women she'd never met, janitors, receptionists, even a few assistants from other floors were reaching out quietly, saying, "I saw what they did to you." Some told their own stories. Some just said, "Thank you." The article dropped that Friday evening. The headline was short, sharp, impossible to ignore. "Kneel or be fired, the hidden abuse of power in corporate America." It didn't mention her name, but it didn't have to. People knew. Screenshots of anonymous messages. Patterns of retaliation. Executive names blurred out, but clear enough for insiders to recognize. Burke's behavior wasn't an isolated case, and he wasn't the only one. By Monday, the company's PR department was in full crisis mode. Legal teams issued statements. Staff were warned not to talk to media, but they did anyway. Whispers turned to voices. Amara walked the lobby with a straight back now, not proud, but steady. Some people avoided her. Others gave small nods of respect. Midweek, she was summoned again, this time not to HR, but to the 27th floor. Legal. She entered the large room, sunlight spilling across a glass table. Inside sat a team, 2 lawyers, a mediator, and Ms. Dalton from HR, looking more tired than before. And Burke. This time, he didn't smirk. This time, he looked pale. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming. We want to inform you that Mr. Burke has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of a formal investigation." Amara sat quietly. "He has also been instructed to have no further contact with you, directly or indirectly." She turned slightly toward Burke. He didn't speak, didn't look at her. Coward. After the meeting, Ms. Dalton caught up with her near the elevators. "We never meant for this to happen," she said awkwardly. "It slipped through the cracks." "No," Amara said calmly. "You just never looked down here before." Dalton nodded slowly. "That's changing." That night, walking home, Amara stopped by a diner with Malik. He dipped fries into ketchup with a proud, messy grin. She looked at him, at his little face, and felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. She hadn't won. Not yet. But something had shifted. She was no longer powerless. And neither were the women behind her. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Amara's days filled with interviews, some on the phone, some in small meeting rooms with reporters taking notes and cameras poised. She wasn't used to the attention, but she knew it mattered. Not just for her, but for every cleaner, every support staff member who'd been silenced too long. Her coworkers started to look at her differently. Some with newfound respect, others with jealousy or confusion. The building security guards, once indifferent, now nodded with subtle recognition when she passed. One afternoon, while waiting outside the building, Amara was approached by a young man, one of the janitors she barely knew. "Hey," he said, voice low but steady. "I wanted to say, thanks. You made me think I don't have to take their crap anymore." She smiled faintly. "That means more than you know." But not everyone was happy. She still received cold stares from some executives and whispers when she passed. Her workload sometimes mysteriously increased, and she caught Burke's allies watching her from across the floor. Yet, Amara felt stronger. She held on to the moments with Malik, the small victories, the growing network of support. One evening, as she tucked Malik into bed, he looked up with sleepy eyes. "Mom, you're like a superhero," he whispered. Amara kissed his forehead. "I'm just fighting for us," she said softly. The battle was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, Amara stood tall, no longer bending, no longer breaking. She was ready. As the investigation dragged on, the atmosphere in the building grew tense. Burke was rarely seen, and rumors swirled about possible disciplinary action. One afternoon, Amara was called into the CEO's office, a room she never imagined she'd enter. The CEO, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, sat behind a polished desk. "Ms. Carter," she began, "we've reviewed your case thoroughly." Amara nodded, heart pounding. "We acknowledge the failures in management that allowed this to happen." The CEO paused, then added firmly, "Mr. Burke will be terminated effective immediately." Relief flooded Amara, but so did a weight, the knowledge that the fight had been long and exhausting. The CEO leaned forward. We want to offer you a position to help improve workplace culture here. Your voice is needed." Amara blinked, surprised. She had started as a cleaner. Now, she was being asked to help lead change. That evening, she told Malik the news. He smiled wide. "You're my hero, Mom." She hugged him tight. For the first time, Amara believed that change was possible, not just for her, but for everyone like her. Months later, the office building felt different. Not just because Burke was gone, but because things had started to change, slowly, but surely. Amara walked the halls with a purpose now. Her new role meant meetings with management, training sessions, and advocating for the voices of people who had once been invisible. She still cleaned sometimes, just to stay grounded, to remember where she came from. Her colleagues smiled more often. There were new policies in place about harassment, clearer ways to report abuse, and managers being held accountable. One afternoon, Malik joined her at work for a special event, Community Day, where employees and their families toured the building. He ran ahead, laughing, holding her hand tightly. She looked around, feeling proud and hopeful. This was more than a job. It was a movement. Later that night, as she tucked Malik into bed, he looked up and whispered, "Mom, you changed the world." She kissed his forehead, fighting back tears. "Maybe just a little," she said softly. Amara knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew she was no longer alone. Together, they were building a better tomorrow.